Hello, Deutschlerner. Today we're going to go through this worksheet of haben versus sein in the perfect tense. And if you're unaware, there's a video that explains what this difference is. It is linked down in the description, but we're going to go ahead and get started into which form do we need and which verb do we need, and of course, why for each one of these. So if you're unaware, the perfect tense uses a form of haben or sein as a helping verb in order to form a past tense, talking about things that are already done. And so each one is going to have in one of these blanks here either a form of haben or a form of sein. And it is, of course, also going to have a past participle, which is generally made up of a GE at the beginning and a T at the end. And in the middle, you will find the stem of the verb. In other words, the infinitive minus EN, unless, of course, it is an irregular verb such as gelassen here, which has an EN at the end of it, or gefunden, which has a stem change and an EN, and a few other exceptions. But we're not focusing on the past participles in this lesson. We are focusing on the haben or sein part. So, first thing on here, was, insert word here, dir gesagt. So our past participle here is gesagt. That means our infinitive is sagen. The verb sagen means to say. And so this whole sentence would say, what did he say to you? And so in the past tense, we're going to need a form of haben here because it's a transitive verb. It requires an object, which in this case, the direct object is what, and the indirect object is dir. So our sentence here is going to have to use a form of haben. Then we also look at our subject here, which is and the s form of haben is hat. Was hat dir gesagt? What did he say to you? In Nummer 2, it says gelassen at the end of our sentence, which is the past participle of the verb lassen, which is also a transitive verb, meaning that it takes a direct object. And in this case, our direct object is unsere Bücher. Unsere Bücher are our books. So this sentence is supposed to say, we left our books at home. So we're going to have another form of haben here. And this time it goes with the subject wir, which means that we use here haben. Wir haben unsere Bücher zu Hause gelassen. We left our books at home. In Nummer 3, our past participle is gefunden, which is the past participle of the verb finden. It's pretty sloppy there, but finden. And finden means to find. And so in the English and in German, this is a transitive verb. In this case, was is our direct object and ihr is our subject. So since we have another transitive verb, we do need a form of haben. And since it's the ihr form, we use here habt. After that, we have, well, first of all, the translation of number 3 should be, was habt ihr in der Kiste gefunden? What did you find in the box? All right, then in Nummer 4, we have GE at the beginning and a T at the end, and our original verb would be glauben. Glauben is a dative verb, which is why we have a dative object here, but it's also transitive. So even though the object is dative, it still has an object and therefore counts as being a transitive verb, which means, again, we are using a form of haben. This time we have meine Schwester as the subject, and that subject is going to require the s form of the verb, which, as we had before, is hat. So this sentence says, meine Schwester hat mir nicht geglaubt. My sister did not believe me. In Nummer 5, we have a GE at the beginning and an EN at the end for the irregular verb gefahren, and this is the past participle of the verb fahren, which means to drive. Driving is an intransitive verb most of the time, and it is in this sentence that it is intransitive, meaning that it is not we are driving something, but we are driving in a direction of something or something along those lines where it does not have a direct object. So in this one, we are going to use sein. Sein, in case you've forgotten, is irregularly conjugated like in the present tense. And so when we use our helping verb here, we use the same version of that as we would in the present. So we have seid. Seid is the ihr form, and that's why we use that version here. And we use sein because this is an intransitive verb as our past participle. So, wohin seid ihr in den Ferien gefahren? where did you drive to on vacation? Number 6, meine Eltern something nicht zum Spiel gekommen. GE at the beginning for our past participle. This one ends in EN as well because this is also an irregular verb, and this verb is kommen in the infinitive form. So kommen is also an intransitive verb, meaning that it cannot have a direct object, and so we need a form of sein here again. This time we have my parents as the subject, and since my parents are more than one, we have to use here the plural they form, sind. Meine Eltern sind nicht zum Spiel gekommen. My parents did not come to the game. In Nummer 7, we have the past participle gesehen, which is again with a GE at the beginning and an EN at the end for another irregular verb. This time the past participle of sehen, to see. In German and in English, sehen is a transitive verb, which in this case means we have the direct object of this film, diesen Film. That means that we use a form of haben again. This time we have mein Bruder as the subject, my brother, and so we use again the sie s form, hat. Mein Bruder hat diesen Film 10-mal gesehen. My brother has seen this film 10 times. In Nummer 8, we have another regular verb. This means we have a GE in front and a T at the end with a normal stem in the middle. So that is gemacht. It's the past participle of machen. And we look at the verb, the form that we need. We need the ear form. Machen is obviously a transitive verb, and just for proof, we have here was as our direct object. So we have the ear form of the verb haben, habt. Was habt ihr nach dem Film gemacht? What did you do after the film? In Nummer 9, we have the past participle genommen. Genommen is really weird because this N-O-M-M in the middle here does not represent the original verb very well of nehmen. And nehmen means to take. Obviously, you have to take something, and therefore there is a direct object in here, which is was in this sentence. Do is our subject, so we need the do form of our verb haben, and so we say hast. Was hast du mit nach Hause genommen? What did you take with you home? Das Mädchen is the subject of the next one, and the past participle is a regular one here with geführt, which has a GE at the beginning and a T at the end. Geführt is the past participle of führen, which means to lead, and the thing being led in this sentence is das Pony, and so we're having here a direct object. That means, again, we are using a form of haben, and we need the one that goes with das Mädchen. That would be the sie s form again, and so we say das Mädchen hat. Das Mädchen hat das Pony durch den Hof geführt. The girl led the pony through the courtyard. Next up is Nummer 11. We have here wir as our subject and the past participle mitgebracht. This is a gentle reminder that if you have a separable prefix such as mit, you put the GE for your past participle in between your prefix and your rest of your verb, in this case, the stem plus T. This is also an irregular verb in that it has a stem change. Even though it does have a T at the end and a GE at the beginning, it does have that irregular stem, so it does still count as an irregular verb. It is also a transitive verb, which means we have a direct object here, which is why einen Kuchen is there, and that's that direct object of our sentence. So we need the wir form of haben in this sentence, and so we would say haben, which is wir haben einen Kuchen zur Party mitgebracht. We took a cake to the party. In Nummer 12, we have die Lehrerinnen as our subject. Don't forget this N-E-N at the end here indicates that this is the plural version of female teacher. So this is plural female teachers. And the past participle we have here at the end is gezeigt. This is a regular verb. The verb zeigen is the original, the infinitive form of that verb, and it means to show. This one has both a direct object, die Antworten, and an indirect object, ihren Schülern. So the teachers are showing their students the answers. In this case, we again need a form of haben. This time we have the form that goes with the plural sie, as in they, and therefore haben, same as the infinitive. Die Lehrerinnen haben ihren Schülern die Antworten gezeigt. The teachers showed their students the answers. In Nummer 13, we have here the past participle gewesen. Gewesen is a weird one in that it is the past participle of the verb sein, and as is often the case with sein, it does not represent the word sein in any way. With the word wesen, that's not helpful for trying to recognize these two as being connected. But the verb sein is an intransitive verb, and so we use here a form of sein to go with our form of sein, and we need here the ich form, because if ich is in the sentence, it must be the subject, so we have to use here ich bin. Ich bin gestern in der Disco gewesen. Now, there is a typo in this one, so there is gestern on there twice. And basically the reason is that I originally wrote it as Ich bin gestern in der Disco gewesen, and then I rewrote it as Gestern bin ich in der Disco gewesen, and I forgot to take out the secondary gestern, so if you just get rid of that one, then the sentence is fine. In Nummer 14, this one has the past participle gesprochen, which has a weird stem change as well, plus an en at the end, so obviously this is an irregular verb. This verb here is sprechen, which means to speak. Now, most of the time, sprechen is not going to be used with a direct object. So most people would say this is an intransitive verb. So if you just say, I speak, it is being used intransitively. However, sprechen can be used with a direct object, and it's usually implied that you are, because if you are saying, I am speaking, you mean to say that you are speaking words or you are speaking sentences. And so sprechen does count as a transitive verb, meaning that it requires a form of haben. And ich is your subject, because ich is always the subject. If it is in the sentence, it must be. And so we have here, ich habe. Ich habe mit deiner Mutter gesprochen. I spoke with your mother. In Nummer 15, we have the past participle gegangen. Gang is a weird stem there, and then we have an en at the end, which means this is an irregular verb. The original, of course, being gehen. And gehen is an intransitive verb, meaning that it usually does not have a direct object. You can't go something. So in this case, we have here the form of sein that goes with our subject, and our subject is ich, and therefore ich bin. Jeden Tag bin ich zur Schule gegangen. Every day I went to school. In Nummer 16, we have the past participle ge and a t at the end. So this looks regular. Haben is actually irregular in other tenses, and therefore it usually counts as an irregular verb. But in this one, it kind of follows the pattern that I teach, which is ge at the beginning, stem, so whatever the verb is minus the en, and then a t at the end for the past participle. So that is the verb haben, and haben is a transitive verb, so we use haben with haben, and we need the do form here because do is the subject. So we have hast du. Hast du je einen Hund gehabt? Have you ever had a dog? Die Kinder, blank, ohne ihre Eltern zu Hause geblieben. Geblieben has a stem change here. It changed from an IE to from an EI to an IE, and then it also has an EN here for the past participle. This also indicates that this is another irregular verb because the original is bleiben, which has EI instead of IE. Then we also have here that this is an intransitive verb. You can't stay something, and if you do stay something, that is actually not a direct object, but more of a predicate nominative. In other words, the subject and the object are the same person or thing. And one is not acting upon the other, which like you would with a reflexive pronoun. Die Kinder are our subject, which means that we need the form of sein that goes with the children, and they, that would be sind. Sie sind. Die Kinder sind ohne ihre Eltern zu Hause geblieben. The students stayed home without their parents. In Nummer 18, we have here the past participle gegeben, which again has a GE and an EN, indicating that it is again an irregular verb, but it just has a normal stem in the middle of it for the verb geben, as our original. Geben means to give, and obviously you have to have a direct object with a verb like geben, which is in our case einen Wecker, an alarm clock. And we even have an indirect object here in this sentence of ihm as him. That's the one receiving the direct object once we have given it. Since this is transitive, we again use haben. And this time we actually use that exact form because we have wir as our subject. In Nummer 19, we have the past participle gewusst. This looks like regular because it has a GE at the beginning and a T at the end, but this stem change here in the middle of wissen changing to gewusst, we have here an irregular verb due to that stem change, so wissen. This is another transitive verb. That means that we have here das as our direct object. That's something that is being done to something else. And so in this case, we have again haben. And we need the one that goes with du, which is our subject, which in this case is hast. Du hast das nicht gewusst. You did not know that. And Nummer 20, we have here our past participle GE and a T at the end. This is not a regular verb though, because the original is denken, which is irregular in the stem here, and it goes from denken to gedacht. And denken is one that you can use you can use it intransitively, like this sentence is, where there is no direct object. You just have your helping verb and then your past participle. But when you think in German, you think thoughts and you think things, and therefore you have to have this as a transitive verb, and therefore again using a form of haben. Ich habe gedacht, I thought. War tot. This is the other past tense, the Präteritum, or the preterite tense. He was dead. I thought he was dead. Next up, we are supposed to make sentences out of these parts of things and pay attention to the punctuation at the end, because this is going to tell us if this is a statement or a question, and you can't really command people in the past tense, so those are kind of our only options. But we have two options in this first one. We could say, did you know my brother, or did my brother know you? Both of those are in the past tense, probably meaning that your brother is no longer with us, but that's the sentence that we are writing here. This is in the past tense, and of course we need this to be as a question. So we start with our verb, which in this case is going to be hast. And then our subject, du. Then we have my brother, which, don't forget, my brother is the direct object of this sentence, and in the accusative form, that means we have to have this en at the end of it, and then Bruder. And then we have to have the past participle of kennen, and kennen is another irregular verb which goes to gekannt. Hast du meinen Bruder gekannt? If you want to switch this around and say, did my brother know you? You would say, hat mein Bruder dich gekannt? And either way, don't forget that it should be a question mark at the end because it is indeed a question. Next up, we have the verb Foligen. And first of all, don't forget that Foligen is a dative verb. So that whichever one of these two we use as the indirect or as the object of the sentence, that one is going to be dative. This time we have the police officer and the criminal. We're going to assume that the police officer is following the criminal and not the other way around, because that would just be weird. So we have here der Polizist. And then the past participle would be at the end for Foligen. This has a direct object, so we use a form of haben, hat. And then der Verbrecher changes to dem Verbrecher for the dative. And then we have our prepositional phrase, durch den Park, through the park. And then at the end, our past participle, which is regular for this verb, gefolgt. Der Polizist hat dem Verbrecher durch den Park gefolgt. Nummer 3. Was is our indication that this should be a question, also indicated by, of course, this question mark at the end. which means we're, of course, going to start with our question word, was. Then we have to identify our verb just to make sure that we're using the right form of haben or sein. Bekommen is a transitive verb. It means to receive. And so we have to use here the form of haben that goes with our subject. And we're going to choose du as our subject for this sentence. So we say, was hast du? And then we have to figure out which thing goes first with either letztes Jahr or zum Geburtstag. And we go time, manner, and place. Time would be first. That would be letztes Jahr. Zum Geburtstag is kind of a secondary time, but in this case, it's more like a manner, the way in which you received this thing. It's for your birthday. So we put zum Geburtstag. And then at the end of all of that, we have the past participle, which actually does not get a GE this time because it has this inseparable prefix BE, and then bekommen is our past participle. Of course, we need to end it with a question mark because it is indeed a question. Was hast du letztes Jahr zum Geburtstag bekommen? What did you receive for your birthday last year? Nummer 4 is back to being a statement. This one is another sentence with a transitive verb. Fragen is to ask. If you ask someone, that's a direct object there. So we have ich as our subject, the form of haben that goes with our subject, habe, the direct object in the accusative case, den Lehrer, and the past participle of our verb, gefragt. Ich habe den Lehrer gefragt. I asked the teacher. You could have, of course, switched this around and say, the teacher asked me, in which case it would be, der Lehrer hat mich gefragt. Next up, we have another question, this time also with the verb lernen. Lernen is another transitive verb, so we will again be using haben here. And this form here, we have du, but we have a question, so we have to start with our verb, which is hast, and then our subject, du, then our direct object, which is the reason that we're using haben to begin with, nichts, which while it is a pronoun, it means nothing, and so is acting as our accusative object here. And then we have our past participle of lernen, gelernt. Did you learn nothing, or have you learned nothing? Hast du nichts gelernt? The last one on this page of my setup here is another statement. This time we only have one thing that can be our subject, which is the game. So we're saying the game did not start on time. Das Spiel and since it's transitive verb again, we have hat, nicht, rechtzeitig, and then our past participle of beginnen, which is begonnen. Again, no GE here because this is again using the inseparable prefix of BE. Even though ginnen is not a verb, beginnen uses it as if it were a inseparable prefix and therefore begonnen as our past participle. It is also irregular because of this stem change here where we went from an I to an O. Next up in Nummer 7, we have another statement. This time we have hinuntergefallen, and this is a weird one because in this sentence we have to fall down, and yet we still have a direct object, which is die Treppe. So the question is it ich habe or ich bin the Treppe heruntergefallen? And this is one of the few times that I would say that it's actually okay to use either or. But personally, I would use here bin because you are falling down, and falling down does not usually require a direct object. And die Treppe is actually acting more like a direction rather than a direct object. At any rate, we're going to start with our subject here, which is ich, and then bin, then our time, which is gestern, Then our place, die Treppe. And then our past participle, this is a separable prefix, so we have hinunter, and then our gefallen, to create our entire past participle. Ich bin gestern die Treppe hinuntergefallen. I fell down the stairs yesterday. In Nummer 8, we have another transitive verb in a statement, and we start with our subject, er. And er is the one that is not verstehen something. So apparently the something not being understood is the question. And so we have hat die Frage, the way in which he understood it, which in this case is not at all. So we would have gar nicht. And then our past participle, which does not have a GE again because ver is an inseparable prefix. And our past participle of verstehen is verstanden. Hat die Frage gar nicht verstanden. He did not understand the question at all. In number 9, we have another statement, this time with an intransitive verb, gehen. And the man is the one doing the gehen in this, in the past tense. So, der Mann. And then a form of sein to go with der Mann, ist. And then time, manner, place, we have jede Woche. Ins Kino, the destination. And then our past participle, gegangen, which is irregular and has that GE at the beginning, but a weird stem in the center. So, der Mann ist jede Woche ins Kino gegangen. The man went to the movie theater every week. Then we have a question mark in the next one for our next sentence. Arbeiten is a transitive verb. Usually you work something or you're working on something, in which case you use a form of haben. We want to use here the haben at the beginning of the sentence. So we say, habt for our ihr form to go with our subject ihr, and then lange, the time, dort, the place, and then our past participle gearbeitet. Did you work there long? Hast du lange dort gearbeitet? Don't forget there is an extra E here in this one because the original form or the stem of the verb ends with a T. So in order for this to be pronounced, we have to, of course, add that extra E in there. In Nummer 11, we have die Patienten, who are the ones that needed something. They apparently needed new medications. So we have the patients, die Patienten. And then we have a form of haben here, which in this case is also haben, because this is a transitive verb. It's the thing they need here is the new medications. Die Patienten haben neue Medikamente. And then gebraucht. The patients needed new medications. Die Patienten haben neue Medikamente gebraucht. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to move to the next slide so that we can do the last 4 here. Next up, we have another statement, this time with the verb spielen, which also uses a form of haben in this tense. And wir are our subject this time, so we say wir haben am Samstag Schach, which is chess, gespielt. Wir haben am Samstag Schach gespielt. We played chess on Saturday. In the next one, we have another intransitive verb, meaning to walk, laufen, and we have our subject of my wife and I. Together we make the wir form or the we form. So when we use this, we need to use the wir conjugation of the verb sein. So meine Frau und ich sind, and then our time and then our place. So we have heute Morgen as our time. And then our place, durch den Park. And then our past participle of laufen is basically just the infinitive with the GE at the front, gelaufen. My wife and I ran through the park this morning. Meine Frau und ich sind heute Morgen durch den Park gelaufen. Up next, we have a question mark again, which means that we have to start either with a question word or a conjugated verb. And our verb this time is fahren, which means to drive. Our question word this time is wohin, which goes first. To where, wohin. Our subject in this one is ihr, which means we need the ihr form of sind, or of sein, that is. And so we would say seid. Ihr seid. Wohin seid ihr? And then we have this summer on vacation. So diesen Sommer, it's accusative in this sentence because it's the time element, and time is accusative. Diesen Sommer. And then on vacation, in den Ferien. And then gefahren as our past participle, which is another one of those that has basically the infinitive with the GE prefix added to the front. Wohin seid ihr diesen Sommer in den Ferien gefahren? Which is, to where did you travel in the summer during vacation? The last one on here is another one that has a subject, a direct object, and an indirect object, that is schreiben as our verb. I'm going to choose ich as our subject, and that would mean that we start with that, ich. And then we have a form of haben to go with ich, because this is a transitive verb. Then our indirect object goes first, which is my cousin, meinem Cousin, in the dative case. And then the accusative form for a letter, einen Brief, as our direct object. And the past participle of schreiben is geschrieben. So, ich habe meinem Cousin einen Brief geschrieben. I sent my cousin a letter, or I wrote my cousin a letter. That's the end of our worksheet for today. I hope that you found this video helpful. I apologize for my terrible handwriting. That's about as good as it gets, especially whenever I'm trying to write on an upright screen, because I can't click to the next slide without having my keyboard out, and I can't flip up my, my tablet here into the form where I can just write on it like a piece of paper without losing the ability to switch slides, apparently. So until I figure out that little glitch, this is the way that this is going to work. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Das ist alles für heute. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.